I never thought I'd live long enough to be called useless by the man who married my only daughter. But life has a funny way of testing you right when you think you've earned a little peace. I had just retired after 40 years in federal contracting. My back was tired, my knees were louder than my old Ford, and for once I thought I could finally slow down. Then my son-in-law, Blake, decided retirement meant I was dead weight. He didn't even say it softly. He said it at Sunday dinner with that smug grin of his, like he was doing me a favor by being honest. He told my daughter Abby that I was becoming too dependent, that I had nothing to offer anymore. And the part that hurt wasn't the words. It was the way Abby stayed quiet. He had no idea that the loan keeping his construction company alive, the one with the shiny trucks and the Instagram before and after videos, only existed because I co-signed it 3 years ago. He begged me back then, said he needed someone respectable to vouch for him, someone the bank would trust. And I did it because Abby loved him. So I just sat there that night, letting him talk, letting him feel tall, letting him believe the world was exactly as he imagined. Blake didn't know the bank still called me when payments were late. He didn't know the credit risk still hit my report first. And he sure didn't know that I still had the right to pull the plug on everything. But he was about to. If you're new here, I'll tell you something. Some families take kindness for weakness, until the truth shows itself at the worst possible moment. Stick with me. This one gets real. After that night, things didn't fall apart all at once. No, Blake preferred the slow drip kind of disrespect. The kind where he didn't have to raise his voice, just raise his eyebrows. You know the type. The guy who thinks a Home Depot credit card makes him a titan of industry. The next few weeks, Abby called less. At first it was, we're busy with the kids. Then it was, Blake's been stressed with work. And before I knew it, she wasn't calling at all. I'd text her to check in and get a thumbs up emoji 24 hours later. That's how you know something's wrong, when your own child starts talking to you like a group chat. But I didn't push. I've learned a few things in 68 years. You push people when they're drifting, they don't come back, they bolt. So I kept quiet. I cut my lawn, played cards at the VFW, tried a Tai Chi class at the community center that lasted exactly 1 session, and every night, I'd sit on my back porch, looking at the house Abby grew up in, wondering when I'd become a visitor in her life. Funny how the heart can break without making a sound. Then one Tuesday morning, the phone rang. Not my cell, the landline. Only 2 people ever called that number anymore. My dentist and the bank. Mr. Porter, the voice said, polite but strained. We need to discuss the business loan you co-signed for Blake Henderson. I felt the air shift. Not panic, just that old instinct from my contracting days. Something was off. What about it? I asked. There are inconsistencies, he said. Missed payments, overextensions. We've reached a point where we need both parties present. You're still the primary co-signer. There it was, the quiet truth slipping through the cracks. I thanked him, hung up, and walked the length of my kitchen twice. Blake hadn't said a word. Not a text, not a heads up, not even a grunt in passing. He had just decided that because I retired, I didn't matter. Not in his house, not in his business, not in the world. He forgot something younger men forget all the time. Retirement isn't the end. Sometimes it's the pause before the biggest reveal of your life. That afternoon, I drove by his job site, a half-finished McMansion on the end of Waverly Court. His guys were leaning against the trailer drinking convenience store coffee, and Blake was pacing, phone to his ear, cursing under his breath. He didn't see me, but I saw everything, stress written across his face like Sharpie. He wasn't running a business. He was barely holding one together. I should have driven away, should have let him deal with his own mess, but Abby had married him, and those kids were still my grandbabies. So I stepped out of my truck and walked over. Blake, I called out. He whipped around like a man expecting bad news. Oh, it's you, he said. No hello, no respect, just irritation. I got a call from the bank, I said calmly. We need to talk. He rolled his eyes, actually rolled them. Harry, don't start. I've got enough crap going on without you adding to it. I kept my voice steady. Missed payments, Blake. They contacted me because I'm on the loan. He scoffed. It's fine. Just a delay with a supplier. Nothing you need to worry about. A lie, a big one. Still, I said, they want us both there. It's non-negotiable. He stepped closer, chest puffed. Look, you signed the papers because Abby begged you, but this is my business. I don't need you poking around trying to play hero. And that right there was the moment he showed me exactly who he thought I was. A relic. A retiree with too much time and not enough power. Bank meeting's Friday, I said. 10 a.m., don't be late. I'll go when I want, he snapped. You don't run anything anymore. He turned and walked off. And for the first time in months, I laughed. Not a spiteful laugh, just the kind you let out when someone has no idea they're standing on a trapdoor of their own making. Because the truth was simple, he had no business without me. And the bank was about to prove it. Stick with me, because this thing, it was about to get loud. Friday came faster than I expected. Maybe it was the way the house felt too quiet that week. Maybe it was knowing Abby hadn't checked in, even after the bank called. Or maybe it was the simple truth that I knew something was coming. Something big enough to crack this family right down the center. I woke up early, brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to resurrect a corpse, and stared at the suit hanging on the back of my bedroom door. I hadn't worn that suit since Abby's wedding. I wasn't planning a statement, but sometimes life chooses your wardrobe for you. And that morning, I felt like showing up as the man I used to be. The man Blake forgot existed. The drive to the bank was calm. Snow from the night before still clung to the edges of the sidewalks, and the air had that crisp East Coast bite that wakes your bones before your brain. When I pulled into the parking lot, Blake's oversized black F-150 was already there, parked sideways because he never learned the concept of lines or etiquette. I walked inside, nodded to the receptionist, and took a seat in the meeting room. Blake came in a minute later, trying to hide the fact that he'd rushed. Breath a little short, hair still wet. He looked irritated, like my very existence was another bill he couldn't pay. He didn't say hello. He just sat, pulled out his phone, and started scrolling like a teenager grounded for the weekend. Morning, I said. He gave a grunt. Let's get this over with. I've got things to do. Before I could respond, the door opened and in walked Mr. Harlan, the loan officer who'd handled the entire thing 3 years ago. Older guy, gray eyebrows, the kind of calm presence that could deliver good news or ruin your whole month without changing his tone. Gentlemen, he said, shaking both our hands. Thanks for coming in. Blake leaned back, hands behind his head. So what's the big emergency? I told your assistant we had a small delay with materials. Harlan gave a slow nod. Well, Blake, that's part of it, but not all of it. He placed a stack of papers on the table, too thick to be anything good, and slid it toward us. These are the last 12 months of payment activity, he said, or more accurately, missed activity. Blake snatched the papers and flipped through, jaw tightening. This is blown way out of proportion, he said. I had a cash flow snag. Happens in construction. Harlan looked at him steadily. A 12-month snag? Blake's mouth twitched, but he didn't have an answer. Harlan continued. We've given as much leeway as our policies allow, but because this loan was secured with a cosigner of significant credit standing, he turned toward me. We can't take any further steps without Mr. Porter's involvement. Blake snapped. He's retired. He's got nothing to do with my company anymore. Harlan's tone didn't change. On paper, he has everything to do with it. He's still the primary guarantor. Blake whipped his head toward me like he'd just realized a ghost was sitting beside him. You didn't tell me they still had you listed. I didn't think I needed to, I said quietly. You should have, he barked. Harlan held up a hand. This meeting isn't about blame. It's about reality. Blake, your business is at risk of default, and per the loan terms, any restructuring, extensions, or penalty adjustments require Mr. Porter's approval. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Blake stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as the retiree he dismissed, but as the man who held the keys to his entire future. What does he have to approve? Blake asked, voice suddenly softer. Harlan opened the last folder. Given the missed payments, rising debt load, and lack of collateral, the bank is considering withdrawal. Blake paled. Withdrawal, you mean? Termination of the loan, Harlan said, which would place your company in immediate jeopardy. Blake looked from Harlan to me, back to Harlan, then finally, locked eyes with me. You can't let them do that, he said, not angry, not smug, just scared. And I felt something shift. Not sympathy, not revenge. Just the clarity of knowing the moment had finally arrived. The moment when truth replaces arrogance and reality knocks the wind out of a man who thought he could outrun it. I leaned forward. "Blake," I said, "I told you the bank called. You didn't want to listen." He shook his head. "Harry, come on, we're family. You can't hang me out to dry." Family. The word tasted strange coming from him, like he'd borrowed it from someone else. I didn't respond. I just let the weight of his own choices sit between us like another person in the room. And for the first time since this whole thing started, Blake finally looked worried enough to tell the truth. "Harry," he whispered, "I'm in trouble. Real trouble." I didn't answer Blake right away. I let him sit in that silence because sometimes a man needs to feel the full weight of his own decisions before he can understand them. And the truth was, watching him crack open like that, watching that inflated confidence leak out of him, wasn't satisfying. It was sobering. This wasn't just a business problem. This was a man who had built his whole identity on the illusion of strength. And illusions don't survive bank meetings. Mr. Harlan cleared his throat. "We want to discuss options, but any option requires cooperation from both of you, and transparency." He looked directly at Blake when he said transparency, which told me this situation was worse than the stack of papers let on. Blake rubbed his face with both hands like he could wipe the panic off. "Look," he said, voice rough. "Things got tight. Lumber prices went up. Couple clients delayed payments. I had to front costs. It just snowballed." Harlan nodded. "That happens. But it's the hidden line of credit, the private supplier loan, and the equipment lease default that worry us. Those weren't disclosed." I turned toward Blake sharply. "You opened more credit lines?" He didn't meet my eyes. Just to get through a few jobs, I was going to catch up. "When?" I asked. He didn't answer. Harlan slid another document forward. "Your debt-to-income ratio isn't just strained, Blake. It's collapsed. And because the original loan was tied to Mr. Porter's credit, the bank needs assurance he's comfortable continuing." Blake swallowed hard. "Comfortable? He shouldn't have to worry about anything. I never asked him to step back in." "You also never told me you were 12 months behind," I said. His jaw tensed. "Because you'd judge me." "I co-signed your loan," I said. "Judgment is part of the job." Blake's composure finally broke. Not in a dramatic way, just a small, almost boyish slump of the shoulders that made him look younger, weaker. "Harry, if this loan gets pulled, I'm done. The company's gone. The guys I employ, some of them have been with me for years. My truck, my equipment, my licenses, I'll lose everything." "And you didn't think I deserved to know you were hanging by a thread?" I asked. "I didn't want you involved," he said quietly. "You retired. I thought you wanted to be done with responsibility." "That's what you think retirement is?" I said. "Being finished? Being useless?" He flinched. The irony hit him right in the chest. Harlan folded his hands. "Blake, the bank has one immediate requirement. You need to restructure the payment plan. To do that, we need Mr. Porter's written consent. Without that, this loan defaults." Blake turned to me desperately. "Harry, please." There it was. The word I hadn't heard from him in years. The one he thought he'd outgrown. The word that finally stripped away the swagger. For a second, I saw the raw truth. Blake wasn't a villain. He was a man who'd built his entire self-worth on a business he could barely manage, and instead of asking for help, he doubled down on pride until it nearly choked him. "I'm willing to help," I said slowly, "but not blind." "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means," I said, "I need to see everything, every invoice, every credit line, every project. No hiding, no excuses. Full access to the books." His eyes widened. "You want to audit me?" "I want to understand what I'm saving," I said. "Because I'm not sticking my neck out again for a company that isn't being run honestly." He looked offended, but the situation was too dire for bravado. "Fine," he muttered. "You can look. It's not that bad." Harlan gave a subtle wince that told me it was absolutely that bad. "And there's something else," I said. Blake froze. "What?" "I want weekly updates, no surprises. You treat me like a partner, not a nuisance." A long pause. "I can do that." "You'll have to," I said. "Because if I sign these restructuring papers, I'm tying my entire financial stability to your decisions again, and I'm not going through this twice." For the first time that morning, Blake didn't argue. He didn't roll his eyes, smirk, or try to one-up me. He just nodded. Small, resigned, honest. Harlan slid the restructuring documents toward me. If you sign here, we can proceed. It keeps the loan alive, buys time, and stops collection actions. I stared at the line where my name belonged. My hand hovered over the pen. I could almost feel Blake holding his breath. But something didn't sit right. Harlan, I said, what happens if I don't sign today? He adjusted his glasses. The loan enters formal review. If it goes to default, the bank begins recourse against Blake's business assets and against your credit file as guarantor. So either way, I said, I'm impacted. Yes, he said softly. Blake closed his eyes like that piece of information was a punch he wasn't ready for. Harry, I didn't mean for... I know, I said, but meaning doesn't change numbers. I picked up the pen, twirled it once, then placed it back down. I'll sign, I said, on one condition. Blake tensed again. What now? You and Abby bring the kids over for dinner this week. No excuses, no distance, no disappearing act. He blinked in confusion. That's what you want? That's what I've always wanted, I said. Family. His face softened in a way I didn't expect. Vulnerable. Real. Yeah, he said quietly. We can do that. I finally signed the papers. The tension in the room eased, but only slightly. A loan can be saved in a meeting. A family takes longer. As Blake walked out ahead of me, shoulders still hunched, Harlan pulled me aside. Mr. Porter, he said gently, I hope you know, you just saved him. I shook my head. No, I gave him time. Saving him? That's up to him. And as I stepped out into the cold East Coast air, I knew the real confrontation wasn't this meeting. It was the one waiting at home. I drove home from the bank with the heat blasting and the radio off. Not because I was angry. Anger is loud, and what I felt was quiet, heavy. The kind of weight that settles behind your ribs and doesn't announce itself until you sit down and realize you haven't really breathed in 20 minutes. I'd signed the papers. Blake had said the right words. But words are wind, and I've lived long enough to know a storm doesn't break just because someone apologizes. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked the same as always. Same worn shutters, same porch light I kept meaning to replace, same maple tree in the front yard that Abby climbed when she was 8. Nothing had changed, but something inside me felt different. More awake, more alert. Like I'd stepped back into a role I thought I'd retired from, protector of the family, whether they deserved it or not. I went inside, hung up my coat, and sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water, staring at my phone. Should I call Abby? Should I wait for her to call me? Should I pretend nothing had happened and let the family course correct on its own? I didn't get the chance to decide. Blake called me before I even set the glass down. Harry, he said, voice low, I told Abby. I felt a pinch in my chest. Told her what? Everything, he said. About the loan, the missed payments, the bank calling you, what I said to you before. And, I asked. She's upset, he said. Mostly at me, a little at you. She thought I kept you in the loop. I told her I didn't. I told her I handled things wrong. Handled? I repeated. That's an interesting word. He exhaled. She wants to talk to you tonight. I checked the clock. Late afternoon. Tell her to come over, I said. A few hours later, Abby pulled into the driveway in her SUV. She sat in the car for a moment, staring at the steering wheel like it held answers. When she finally came to the door, she didn't knock, just walked in like she used to. Her eyes were tired, her shoulders drawn. Dad, she said softly. Hi, sweetheart. She sat across from me at the kitchen table. Same spot where she used to do homework. Same spot where she told me she was pregnant with her first child. Funny how life circles back to old chairs. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. Your husband wasn't talking, I said, and I don't force myself where I'm not welcome. She winced at that. Dad, I never wanted distance between us. Blake said you needed space. He said a lot of things. She looked down at her hands. I know, and I'm sorry. I reached across the table and put my hand on hers. I'm not angry at you, Abby. I'm just tired. Tired of feeling like I'm only useful when there's a fire to put out. Her eyes filled. We never meant to make you feel that way. Maybe not, but feelings don't need permission. For a long time, we sat in silence. Not awkward, just full, like we were both trying to rebuild something without saying the words. Then she said, Blake's scared, Dad. I've never seen him like this. He should be, I said. He thought he could carry everything alone and still treat people like they didn't matter. And you saved him? No, I said. I gave him a chance. The saving part is his job. She wiped her eyes. He knows he messed up. I know. She hesitated. Are you still mad at him? I'm disappointed, I said. Mad fades. Disappointment lingers. She took a shaky breath. Dad, can we come for dinner tomorrow? All of us? The kids miss you, and I miss you. That one hit me deep. Yes, I said. Of course. When she left, I felt something loosen. Some knot that had been tightening for months. But I also knew tomorrow's dinner wasn't just a meal. It was a test. The next day, I cleaned the house like the president was coming. I made roast chicken, mashed potatoes, Abby's favorite green beans. I even pulled out the good plates, the ones I only used on holidays. If tonight was a restart, I wanted it to feel like one. At 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. The kids barreled in first, tiny tornadoes in winter jackets, hugging my legs like they'd been waiting years. Abby came next, carrying a pie, and behind her was Blake. He looked different. Not physically. Still big boots, still the beard trimmed too close, still the posture of a man always trying to seem taller than he is. But his face was different, softer, less sure of itself. Harry, he said quietly. Blake. We shook hands. Not warmly, not coldly, just honestly. Dinner was slow, tentative. The kids talked the most, bless their little lungs. Abby tried to fill gaps. Blake kept glancing at me like he was checking for aftershocks. Finally, after dessert, he cleared his throat. I need to say something, he said. Abby touched his arm. Go ahead. He looked me dead in the eye. I'm sorry. A real sorry. Not the, let's get past this sorry. I finally understand sorry. I treated you like you were done, he said, like getting older made you irrelevant, and that was wrong. You've done more for me than my own father ever did. I should have respected that. I stayed quiet. And the loan, he continued. I should have talked to you. Should have trusted you. Should have, I don't know, seen you as part of the family instead of someone slowing me down. I let him finish, then said, Blake, I don't need perfection. I need honesty. That's the only currency that keeps a family standing. He nodded. I'll earn it back. We'll see, I said, but tonight's a good start. Abby looked relieved. The kids crawled into my lap, and for the first time in a long, long while, the house felt like home again. But part of me knew the story wasn't over. Repairing a business is one thing. Repairing a family is another. And tomorrow, the world outside this house would have its own opinions. A loan restructuring doesn't stay quiet for long in a tight East Coast suburb. The real test was still ahead, and it was coming fast. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Not because of nerves, but because something in the air felt different. Like when you know a storm has passed, but the ground is still wet, and the sky hasn't decided if it's done. I made coffee, sat by the window, and listened to the silence of a house that had held more tension than laughter for months. Last night had been good, surprisingly good. But good moments are fragile, and I wasn't naive enough to think one dinner could fix everything. Around 9, my phone buzzed, a number I recognized, the bank. I answered with a steady voice. Morning. Mr. Walker, the loan officer said. We finished the final review. The balance sheet Blake submitted looks accurate. The restructured loan is officially approved. Congratulations. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Thank you. There is one note, she continued. Given your personal stake in the loan, we'd like you present for the sign-off. Just a formality. Understood. And word has gotten around, she added. People in Blake's industry know your role now. Some of them have reached out to us thinking you might want to invest in certain projects. She said it casually, but I felt the ground shift under my feet. Why? I asked. Well, there's a sense you have an eye for stability, and that you don't make emotional decisions. Funny, the entire situation had been nothing but emotional. I thanked her and hung up, but the words stuck with me. People wanted my input again, my perspective, my experience, something everyone, Blake included, had acted like I'd outgrown. Maybe I wasn't done. Maybe retirement didn't mean stepping off the map. Maybe it meant choosing where to stand. I took my time getting ready, put on a clean shirt, my old leather jacket, and drove to the bank. Blake was already there when I walked in, pacing like a man sitting outside a delivery room. He stopped when he saw me. "Harry, hey, you ready?" "Let's get this done," I said. We went into the office together. Papers were signed. Questions were answered. It was surprisingly calm, considering how much chaos had led to this moment. When it was finished, Blake shook the loan officer's hand like she'd just saved his life. Outside, he turned to me. "I know you've heard the rumors," he said. "The guys talking, the other contractors. Everybody knows now." "They do," I said. "And you're probably hearing that I dragged the company into a bad place." "I'm hearing the truth," I said. "What matters is what you do next." He nodded, jaw tight. "I'm going to fix it, I swear to you." I studied him for a moment. This wasn't the cocky, dismissive man who once told me I didn't matter. This was someone humbled by real consequences. Someone who finally understood that pride doesn't pay bills and arrogance doesn't build houses. "Good," I said, "because I have expectations now." His eyebrows shot up. "Expectations?" "Yep, I'm still a part of this loan. That means I'm invested. Not as your boss, not as your enemy, but as someone who wants to see this family stand straight." He swallowed. "I won't let you down." "We'll see," I said. "Earning trust is like building a deck. You don't get to skip steps." He laughed, almost in disbelief. "You know, I used to think you were just old." "I am old," I said. "I'm just not useless." He looked down, nodding slowly. "You're the reason this company is still alive." "No," I corrected him. "I'm the reason it gets another chance. What you do with that chance is up to you." We shook hands, and for once, the shake felt even, like neither of us was gripping harder to feel in control. Later that afternoon, Abby came over with the kids, armed with takeout and board games. The house filled with noise, the good kind, the kind that fills cracks instead of creating them. At one point, my youngest granddaughter climbed into my lap, placed her tiny hand on my face, and said, "Grandpa, Mommy said you saved Uncle Blake's work." I smiled. "Something like that." "And that you're the smartest," she said proudly, "even though you're, older." I laughed. "That's exactly when people get smart." The whole house laughed along with me, even me. But after the kids were in the living room building skyscrapers out of blocks, Abby sat across from me at the table, her face thoughtful. "Dad, I know things got off track," she said softly, "but I want you to know something." "What's that?" "You're not just family, you're the backbone. You always were." She reached over, squeezed my hand. "We forgot that, but we won't again." Her words didn't heal everything, but they healed enough. That night, after everyone left and the house was quiet again, I walked onto the porch and looked out at the street. Lights flickered in neighbors' windows. Cars passed occasionally. Life moved on, as it always does. I thought about everything that had happened, about being called useless, about being shut out, about the bank meeting, the loan, the dinner, the apology, the rebuilding, not just of a company, but of trust. If life has taught me anything, it's this. People will underestimate you right up until the moment they need you. And when they finally see your worth, it's rarely because you changed. It's because the circumstances finally allowed the truth to shine through. I wasn't useless. I wasn't obsolete. I wasn't forgotten. I was still a pillar, still a provider, still a man with something left to give. And as I stood on that porch, hands in my jacket pockets, cool air settling against my skin, I realized something else. Retirement didn't mean stepping out of the story. It just meant I got to choose which chapters I wanted to write. And this one ended exactly how it needed to. And if you've walked this far with me, friend, don't wander off just yet. Stories like this happen in families more often than folks admit, and every time we shine a little light on them, someone out there realizes they're not alone. So stick around, take a breath, and let me pour you into the next story. Trust me, the storm in that one hits even harder than this one. If you think this family learned their lesson, wait until I tell you about the nephew who emptied my savings account thinking I wouldn't fight back. He had no clue the signature he forged belonged to a trust I controlled.